In Star Wars, the Galactic Empire's Imperial Army required the Imperial Vehicle Corps to train vehicle drivers and pilots to operate the various Walker, Tank, and Juggernaut variations. The scope of the Imperial Vehicle Corps covered land and sea vehicles, but also aircraft which could not fly into orbit and would otherwise be part of the Imperial Navy's jurisdiction. This is the Imperial Army combat vehicle pilots and driver types which serve the Galactic Empire. The Imperial Combat Driver was specifically assigned to the Galactic Empire's Army ground vehicles. Standard training included most smaller vehicle types such as speeder bikes and all-terrain defense pod walkers, but also could pilot Imperial patrol gunships. Featured in Star Wars Rebels, these were seen driving or piloting various types of ground vehicle. With light chest and shoulder plate armor, including an Army Trooper design helmet, they kind of had a Stormtrooper look to their appearance. The AT-ACT drivers uniquely served both the Imperial Army and the Navy as a multi-skilled pilot or driver. However, they were commonly assigned to piloting all-terrain armoured cargo transports as a non-specialist driver division, as the AT-ACT was not considered a battlefield assault vehicle. They were also trained to drive the Imperial assault tank, as required, plus other walkers. Their white armour was a design combination of the Imperial tank driver armour, including the red chest plate markings of the tank commander. They wore a white helmet version of the Coastal Defender Stormtrooper, but with a red Imperial crest. The most recognisable on the list has to be the AT-AT pilot, but also known as the AT-AT driver. As a specialised pilot type, they operated the Imperial Army's massive AT-AT walkers. Often working closely as a pair, the AT-AT pilots operated the walkers' driving and firing controls. Where required, a commander would also occupy the walker's cockpit for missions and battles. With a very similar appearance to the Imperial TIE Fighter pilot, but instead of black, they wore pale grey armour, chest and shoulder plates, plus their distinctive helmet. The helmet's technology directly interfaced with the AT-AT's computer systems, allowing the pilot to monitor vehicle information. The pilot's insulated suit incorporated a life support system with an oxygen supply, heating and cooling for survival purposes. The AT-ST driver were the Imperial Army's specialised pilot to operate the all-terrain scout transport. They received specialised training to acquire a solid awareness of balance over uneven terrain for operating the walker's unsteady two-footed design, but also operating as a crew of 2 pilots. One focused on operating its movement, and the other crew member operated the AT-ST's armaments as the gunner. Compared to other Imperial pilots, these Imperial specialists had mostly no armour, and wore a one-piece light grey jumpsuit. The Imperial Combat Assault Tank Pilot, also known as GAV pilots, specialised in operating combat assault tanks. They were trained to manoeuvre the tank in tight urban environments, as well as use as light infantry, reconnaissance, skirmishers, as well as acting as an escort for larger combat vehicles. The combat tank's crew consisted of 3, a commander, a driver, and a gunner. They wore a white plastoid armour design derived from the Coastal Defender Stormtrooper, and it allowed for the necessary flexibility to operate within the confined spaces inside the tank cockpit. The non-commissioned officer commanders were distinguished by the dark grey markings across their upper section of their armour, but also the combat assault tank pilot were also trained to pilot other Imperial assault vehicles. Probably the most versatile of all was the Imperial transport pilot, who closely resembled the combat assault tank pilot, although their blue markings on their helmet, chest, shoulder, waist and shin plates set them clearly aside from most other pilot types. Their training covered many specializations including ground-based AT-AT, AT-ST walkers, and troop transports, as well as pilots for transport shuttles. The Juggernaut pilot was the type of combat driver that piloted the A9.2 Juggernaut transports. More closely aligned to the Imperial Army Swamp Troopers, they too lacked the usual discipline of the elite stormtroopers, adopting a more relaxed approach to their appearance by often taking off their helmets. Wearing the grey-green armour, chest and shoulder plates of the Imperial Swamp Troopers, the rest of their grey-green uniform was a mixture of the combat assault tank pilot's helmet, but also the Coastal Defender Stormtrooper displaying red markings on their left upper bicep armour to indicate rank. The TK Stormtrooper in the early years of the Empire's reign were also trained to pilot various types of army vehicles, as well as deployed for standard trooper duties. They were able to pilot gunships, but also trained to drive troop transports, and even the A9 Juggernaut tank vehicles. However, this type of trooper was eventually phased out in favour of Imperial Stormtroopers, who were not trained to pilot Imperial ground vehicles or aircraft. The Imperial submarine pilot was the most unusual pilot variation serving the Imperial Army. They were actually Imperial Navy troopers who had been cross-trained to operate certain vehicles. One of their duties was to pilot the Imperial submarines. For their duties, the submarine pilot wore the usual Navy trooper black uniforms, with a distinctive large black protective helmet with a chin strap. Although in this picture from a Darth Vader comic, they vaguely appeared to be wearing helmets similar to an Imperial TIE fighter pilot, but there was very little information to confirm this was the usual helmet, but interesting all the same. So that's the Imperial Army Trooper types as part of the Galactic Empire from Star Wars, and let me know if you know of any I missed. Subscribe and hit the notification button to let you know of further Imperial Army videos. As always, thanks for watching and long live the Empire.